Burnaby Deer Lake.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find it simply astounding that after 11 years in government, this government can suddenly find out that there's a mess and they better do something about it. It's amazing. And it is quite astounding as well that the minister talked about transparency. So let's talk about transparency. The Opposition Caucus filed a Freedom of Information request last October for any materials related to the impact on BC from the federal omnibus crime bill. The package that came back last week only showed 6 pages of media speaking notes and a press release on the issue, not a single page of analysis. To the Premier, why did this government tell British Columbians the impact analysis would be done when this Freedom of Information package implies the only action seems to have been sound bites?
Talking points. Nice. Yeah. Attorney.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as we've said all along, and the member opposite should well know this, trying to calculate accurately, for example, the complexity of Bill C-10, when in fact what we do know is that when we look at how judges actually make their judgments, we can't predict necessarily how they're going to make those decisions. So we've been very clear, and one thing that we did very clearly was when we met with the federal ministers recently, we outlined the concerns that we had about potential cost impacts. In fact, British Columbia led the discussion at those meetings. But we're going to continue to accurately try to assess the costs, but I'll ask the member opposite. Which part of Bill C-10 is she not interested in supporting? Is it tougher penalties for child exploitation in British Columbia? We actually lobbied for those changes, and we're going to continue to support Bill C-10.
Member has a supplemental.
I absolutely do, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. And to the minister opposite, this government has known that this crime bill has been coming for well over a year, and very little, if anything, has been done in terms of impact and the tremendous impact it's going to have on the taxpayers of this province. The financial audit released last week by the Ministry of Finance, but completed in September before the information a request was filed, clearly contains briefing material on the impacts of the federal crime legislation. So much for transparency. To the Premier or the Minister, why did this government hide the audit, contrary to the law of this province, by not including it in the Freedom of Information package?
Attorney.
Mr. Speaker, we have been perfectly clear about our support for the content of Bill C-10. In fact, previous Attorney Generals, as part of this government, went to Ottawa and lobbied for tougher and more stringent penalties for people who exploit children in British Columbia. That's what we support, and we've been very public about that. And Mr. Speaker, I can assure you, we are going to continue to do the analysis necessary. And like all of our counterparts at the federal, provincial, territorial meetings, the member opposite might want to check with their cousins in Manitoba, because they didn't stand up and say one thing about the costs of Bill C-10 at those meetings.